we begin with the race for the White House. Donald Trump is about to face one of the biggest obstacles of his campaign. His lawyers say they will be at the U.S. Supreme Court tomorrow. The case involves Trump's ballot eligibility and a push to stay on Colorado's ballot. The state is citing the 14th Amendment. It states that anyone who has taken part in an insurrection can't run for public office. So joining us now is Will Thomas, a business law professor at the University of Michigan. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
So this is something that we're watching pretty closely. Your thoughts on this latest announcement in this situation?
Yeah, we're in a remarkable moment. I mean, Donald Trump is currently engaged in, I guess, 7 major cases. There's 4 prosecutions, there's 2 civil lawsuits, and then, of course, there's the ballot challenge headed to the Supreme Court. Any of those would be a big deal, but I think the last one in particular is a case that could directly impair his ability to run for office in 2024. So it's going to be interesting to see what the court takes of it.
Yeah, pretty unusual to see a presidential candidate facing these kinds of situations, especially going into an election. How do you feel, based on what we've seen so far, the Supreme Court will side?
So I agree. This is a thorny legal issue. I've seen lots of sort of constitutional scholars jumping in both directions. I suspect, as do many, that the Supreme Court will ultimately allow Trump to run for office in some way or another. But the devil's going to be in the details here, right? So how the Supreme Court reasons its way to that outcome could still very well create a bunch of legal obstacles or roadblocks that the campaign is going to have to overcome over the next several months.
So as someone who studied business law, you have watched these kinds of situations before, but this one really just is so unusual. What does it say about just the changing dynamics of society that we're even seeing something like this happen with someone who's running for the office of president?
It's truly a remarkable situation. I mean, look, running for president, by all accounts, is one of the more challenging things you can do in this country. And I can't even imagine a situation like what we're seeing now, where somebody is not just running for president with all those challenges, but is running in a way that has all sorts of sort of legal risks and liabilities and judgments coming out sort of day after day. Case in point, we have an entirely separate legal case going on, and we're expecting a big decision, any day now. So.
And the president is obviously fighting this and arguing this. Are there any points that you think can come into his side there to help him and be working in his favor?
Yeah, so I mean, I should say, right, this is a very serious legal challenge that's coming forward. It's not a fringe theory, and you don't have to take my word for it. So 2 of the leading scholars in this field are extremely respected academics, and they are prominent conservatives. And yet they've argued that, actually, Colorado's got the answer right. On the other hand, I think we all sort of had the same gut feeling that it would be surprising and maybe even just unbelievable for a leading presidential candidate to suddenly find themselves barred from office. Now, that itself is not a legal argument. On the other hand, it's the kind of thing that I think the Supreme Court is sort of operating on in the same way that all of us are. And so to the extent they're attuned to the stakes of this situation, I can appreciate that they might not want to interpose themselves directly inside a U.S. election.
And it doesn't seem to be affecting his supporters at all, any of this. What does this say about how strong his base is and his support system?
I mean, I think that's true. And look, it's been true since Donald Trump started running for president. His base of support has proven just remarkably durable. On the other hand, that base by itself has never been enough to deliver him to the presidency. Right? I mean, elections are always won at the margins. So really, the question is whether either this case or maybe some of these other litigation will impact Trump's chances of building the kind of coalition he needs to win in November. And I certainly think that several of the cases that are spilling out over the next weeks and months have that capacity.
Yeah, he's got a lot of support. Of those cases that he's facing, are there any of them that you feel are a little bit more of a fear for the former president?
I think of what's still out there, I think there's 2 big ones. One is a civil case coming out of New York, and the other is a criminal case coming out of D.C. The New York fraud case, this is something that Donald Trump personally has been very involved in. He doesn't have to attend trial, but he regularly participated in last month's trial. And although there's a lot of moving parts in this case, the core claim goes to the heart of his business enterprise. The argument here coming from the state of New York is that Trump and his partners have repeatedly lied about his personal wealth, his business deals, and the value of his real estate. And they did this to get favorable treatment from banks and insurers and tax authorities. So Donald Trump's reputation, both as a individual but especially a businessman, is deeply wrapped up in this case in a way that I think promises serious impact for him.
All right, well, this is something we'll be watching closely. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.